At first glance, this case makes no sense. A son accused of brutally ending his parents' lives, yet described by sources as calm, detached, and almost unaware of what he's done. No visible breakdown, no emotional collapse, just silence and confusion. But according to reports, the warning signs were there long before this ever happened. Doctors allegedly knew something was seriously wrong. Medications were changed, behavior escalated, and behind closed doors, people closest to him reportedly feared exactly what no one wants to say out loud. Because this case may not come down to whether he did it. It may come down to whether his mind had already slipped away. And what doctors reportedly knew before the incident is now raising questions that could change everything. Section 1. The warning signs that kept getting worse reports suggest Nick Reiner had been struggling for years. Long before the tragedy, he was allegedly diagnosed with schizophrenia and placed under psychiatric care. According to sources familiar with the situation, his behavior became increasingly alarming in the month leading up to the incident. Not subtle changes, not quiet warning signs. We're talking about erratic behavior that reportedly intensified by the week. People around him allegedly described him as unstable, unpredictable, and increasingly disconnected from reality. Doctors were reportedly concerned enough to label him dangerous. And that word matters. It suggests they believed the risk wasn't hypothetical anymore. But the most troubling part wasn't just the diagnosis itself. It was what happened when doctors tried to intervene. Because what came next may have pushed an already fragile situation completely out of control. Section 2. When medication makes things worse. A few weeks before the incident, doctors reportedly changed Nick's medication. And while that might sound routine, mental health professionals say this is one of the most volatile moments for someone with a serious psychiatric condition. Mental health treatment often involves a delicate mix of medications. If the balance is even slightly off, symptoms don't just return, they can explode. According to reports, that's exactly what happened here. Sources claim the new medication combination didn't stabilize Nick's condition. It allegedly intensified it. His thoughts became more disorganized. His behavior reportedly more erratic. Some even described him as out of his head. Doctors were said to be adjusting dosages, trying to regain control, but nothing seemed to work. Each attempt reportedly failed to slow the spiral. And while all of this was happening, there was another factor quietly making everything worse. Because medication wasn't the only thing affecting his mental state. Section 3. The role of illegal substances. And why it matters. According to reports, Nick was also allegedly using illegal substances during this period. And mental health experts say that combination can be catastrophic. To be clear, much of this remains unverified and based on reports, but experts note that certain substances can dramatically worsen psychotic symptoms, especially in individuals already diagnosed with schizophrenia. Some professionals describe this as a snowball effect. One issue feeds the next. Medication instability meets substance use. Reality fractures further. Judgment collapses. And this detail may become one of the most contested parts of the case. Because while the defense may argue his mental illness rendered him incapable of understanding his actions, prosecutors are expected to focus heavily on this angle. And that's where the legal battle truly begins. Section 4. The defense that could change everything. Based on what's been reported so far, legal experts believe Nick's defense likely won't be, "I didn't do it." Instead, it may be something far more complex, not guilty by reason of insanity. That phrase doesn't mean walking free. It doesn't mean escaping consequences. It means the court acknowledges that, at the time of the act, the individual could not understand the nature or wrongness of their actions. If accepted, it results in institutionalization, not prison. The person is confined until doctors determine they're no longer a danger. And history shows this kind of defense can succeed, even in shocking cases. But here's where things get complicated. Because insanity defenses hinge on one critical question. Was the mental break caused by illness or by choices? And prosecutors are expected to argue exactly that. Section 5. The prosecution's strategy. Responsibility versus illness. Prosecutors may argue that if illegal substances played a significant role, the insanity defense shouldn't apply. The comparison often used is driving under the influence. Being impaired doesn't excuse the outcome. It's considered a choice that led to harm. But mental health experts push back on that logic. They argue that even substance-induced psychosis can meet the legal threshold for insanity if the individual was genuinely disconnected from reality. That puts this case squarely in a legal gray zone. One side arguing choice, the other arguing collapse. And while lawyers debate theory, there's another disturbing detail that's caught many people off guard. Because according to sources, Nick's current mental state is anything but what people expect. Section 6. His behavior after the tragedy. Sources with alleged direct knowledge describe Nick as calm, cognizant, not frantic, not emotional, not visibly grieving. That alone has shocked many observers. He's reportedly not reacting with rage or sorrow. Instead, he appears dazed, as if the magnitude of what happened hasn't fully registered. Sources claim he's still receiving medication and that doctors are continuing to adjust treatment. But those same sources say he's not truly processing the loss of his parents, not because he doesn't care, but because, according to reports, he may not be capable of grasping it right now. And that raises a chilling question. If this level of instability was visible after the incident, how severe was it before? Section 7. Could this have been stopped? Reports indicate Nick had been in treatment many times before. Some say as many as 17 attempts at rehab or psychiatric care. Mental health professionals explain that short treatment stays often aren't enough, especially when substance use and psychosis overlap. Detox alone can take weeks. Accurate diagnosis can take longer. Stabilizing psychiatric medication can require months. But here's the hard truth. Nick was an adult in his 30s, and once someone reaches that age, families lose control. Parents can't force long-term treatment unless extreme legal steps are taken, and even those are temporary. Experts describe situations like this as a runaway train. Families try to help, doctors intervene, systems attempt to respond. But without cooperation, there's often no way to stop the momentum. And that's what makes this case so haunting, because it feels less like a single failure and more like every safeguard breaking at once. Conclusion. A tragedy with no clean answers. At the center of this case are two parents who lost their lives in a horrific way. That reality can't be softened. But there's also a son whose mind may have unraveled long before that night, and who may never fully understand what happened. This case forces an uncomfortable conversation. Where does accountability end and illness begin? When does treatment stop being enough? And how many warning signs does it take before intervention becomes impossible? Whatever the court ultimately decides, one thing is clear. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's about the fragile line between control and collapse, and what happens when that line disappears. And no verdict will ever undo what's already been lost.